You're one tiny correction away from breaking an argument loop in your village, because small, repair-first adjustments stop people from doubling down. Keep watching, and you'll see how a micro-correction done at the right moment can turn a stalled conflict into a path everyone can follow, even when your trust feels fragile. Repair is not a grand speech. Repair is a tiny, timed reset that keeps two people from turning one disagreement into a permanent story about each other. John Gottman spent years watching couples in a lab, and he tracked something specific: how often partners tried to repair during conflict. Killed those moments a repair. Attempts are like when someone briefly asks to slow down, cracks a small joke to reduce heat, or offers a clarifying sentence instead of escalate. Those micro moves matter because they act like a circuit breaker for your partner's stress response. Notice how a short, non-attack sentence changes the temperature of the room, even if the original problem stays unresolved. When the researchers compared couples, relationships with more successful repair tended to avoid the argument loop, where every response becomes evidence that the other person is unfair. Restoration works when it happens in steps, not when it waits for a perfect feeling. Zehr helped popularize restorative justice through his work on victim-offender mediation, and his approach focuses on concrete repair between harm and community safety. In many programs, a facilitator schedules a series of short meetings instead of a single dramatic confrontation. That timing matters because it limits how long anger has to turn into a stable identity. Track how the process shifts from blame to repair when the next step has a deadline. You can picture it like returning a shopping cart right away, instead of walking it to the back of the lot and forgetting it for days. The cart does not matter emotionally, but the delay creates more friction, and friction invites worse behavior. In village life, that same logic shows up in guild rules and household agreements. People do not need a perfect apology. They need a structured way to close each breach quickly so the group rhythm can resume. One powerful community rule is simple: make amends and do it directly. Alcoholics Anonymous organizes that idea in its 12 steps, and step 9 is explicit about restitution. It asks a person to make amends to such people, when possible, meaning repair is treated as an ongoing obligation, not a vague wish. The step's power is that it converts guilt into a series of concrete actions that can be completed while the harm is still fresh enough to address. Notice how the phrase pushes you towards specific people and specific action, not just feelings. Imagine burning dinner and saying, "I feel awful," versus going back and cleaning the stove, replacing what is damaged, and doing it before the smoke smell becomes the only story in the house. Your nervous system still remembers the heat, but your behavior gives the other person a new record to rely on. That is how micro-corrections break an argument loop. Rule like step 9. The spiral by forcing a follow-up that lowers uncertainty and reduces the sense that the other person will never change. Written restitution rules work because they turn wrongdoing into measurable repair. Leviticus 526 describes a case where someone wrongs another and then makes things right by paying back what was taken plus an additional amount. The text specifies adding 1/5, which is a concrete number, not a symbolic gesture. That structure matters because it makes repair time-bound and countable. Picture the same harm with and without that fixed extra payment rule. Without numbers, people debate intentions, and debates feed the loop. With a fixed restitution step, you focus on completing the next correction, like returning borrowed tools and adding a replacement when they broke. A village rule that resembles this logic does not ask for endless explanation. It requires a timely, staged act that says, if relationship moves forward now, and it leaves less room for grudges to accumulate. Forgiveness rituals get real when they demand repair, not just emotion. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks wrote about Yom Kippur in a way that is widely quoted. People are supposed to seek forgiveness from others before asking God for forgiveness. That rule pushes repair outward to the social world, especially during the days leading up to Yom Kippur. It also implies timing, because apology that arrives after the holiday has passed often feels like a new argument dressed as piety. Compare apologies offered days later versus a direct request for forgiveness at the start of the repentance period. You can see the difference in a school hallway, too, an immediate sorry. I bumped you usually ends with a quick nod, while a later message turns into a separate conversation about disrespect. The delay lets the grievance grow into a narrative. Sacks's framing supports the village repair rule. Small, timely steps prevent conflict from becoming a permanent identity label inside the community. When communities face mass harm, micro-corrections are about restoring trust one piece at a time. Rwanda's gacaca courts run after the genocide use local participation to address crimes through testimony, confession, and community-based accountability. Cases often moved through stages rather than ending with one single verdict. That stage design mattered because the community needed repeated chances for people to repair their place in shared life. Notice how a confession that comes with a concrete consequence changes the story survivors tell about safety. In daily life, the same pattern appears when someone repeatedly breaks a small boundary and then only later makes a real change, like returning stolen money and also stopping the risky behavior. The first step is not a moral speech, it is evidence that behavior is shifting. Gacaca shows why village rules often insist on timed restitution steps. Without them, harm stays abstract, and abstract harm invites endless accusation. Repair becomes plausible when communities give people a structured path to acknowledge harm. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, associated with Desmond Tutu's leadership, offered a public forum where perpetrators could apply for amnesty by telling the truth and contributing to accountability. The process had rules, dates, and scheduled hearings, which forced people to engage step by step. That structure limited the time for grief and resentment to turn into pure retaliation. Track. A scheduled hearing pushes someone to prepare a specific statement instead of letting blame stretch. Think of a neighbor dispute where gossip grows for weeks. Then you finally meet with a mediator, but without any timeline. The delay creates a larger, tangled story that takes more time to unwind than the original problem. An apology lowers conflict fastest when it aims at repair, not just self-protection. Psychiatrist Lazare wrote about medical and social apologies, arguing that a good apology acknowledges harm and focuses on making things right. His work highlighted that people interpret apologies through what follows, like whether the harmed party sees a practical change. It is the difference between "I am sorry you feel that way" and "I made a mistake, and here is what I will do next." Notice how the next step in an apology turns your words into evidence. In your own life, that is the checkout line moment where someone knocks over your groceries and immediately replaces them and apologizes versus someone who apologizes and keeps walking. The first one gives your brain a repair signal, so the argument loop never gets traction. When households write rules about restitution steps after wrongdoing, they are basically operationalizing Lazare's. They make the apology measurable and timed so it points toward behavioral change. Conflict degrades when people talk past each other, so repair rules focus on clear next requests. Marshall Rosenberg popularized nonviolent communication, which uses a structured pattern to name observations, feelings, needs, and specific requests. In practice, the repair move is a request that the other person can act on right away. The structure matters because it narrows the gap between what you mean and what the other person hears. Follow how a specific request interrupts the loop. When you say, please lower the volume for 10 minutes, so I can sleep, the other person can respond to a clear target. When you only say, you never respect me, you force the other person into defending their identity, and the fight grows. Jack Brehm's reactance theory says people often resist when they feel their freedom is being controlled. In conflict, control language can act like a spark. It makes your brain treat the other person as a threat to autonomy, and threat makes your responses sharper. Notice how replacing you have to with choice language changes energy. When one partner issues orders, the other partner feels cornered and builds counter-speech. When one partner asks, would you prefer we try X or Y, the other can respond with collaboration. In a household argument about chores, you must take out the trash invites defiance. You can take it out now, or you can do it after dinner, invites a decision. That decision changes which feedback arrives next, and it changes the system's state from resisting to negotiate. Micro-corrections here are negotiation of intention and emotional safety together. They reduce threat without erasing responsibility. Because the change is small and happens right away, the argument never spirals into something personal.